Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hello, women. Welcome back to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. I am coming to you today recording this intro on the second full moon in Capricorn in this summer of 2024. And just feeling really in the underworlds. Sydney and I recorded this episode a couple weeks ago, and since have both connected on really feeling in the underworlds with this full moon. So if you're feeling that way too, then I just want to share with you some words Sydney shared with me in a voice note the other day. She said to me, I can hear that you're in the underworlds, and I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I actually don't think it's a bad thing at all, because I think that there's so much beauty for us there. And I loved that, and I will remember those words forever. So thank you, Sydney. Before we get started with Sydney's episode, I want to let you know that I have made these playlists. I've been making them for a while and adding songs to them and curating them, these playlists for each of the 4 phases of the cycle. So as you might know by now, the 4 phases of your cycle correspond with 4 archetypes: the maiden, the mother, the sorceress or the wild woman, as I often call her, and the crone or the wise woman. So these 4 playlists are playlists that I listen to in each phase of my cycle. And previously they just had like an hour of songs each, and I used them for a yoga practice, but I've upped that to about 4 to 5 hours per playlist. And I want to share them with you. So you can find the link in the show notes to those 4 playlists. And my intention, my hope, my prayer is that they support you in embodying these 4 different women that you get the opportunity to be every month. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Sydney. So today on the podcast, I have my dear sister, Sydni Sands, a powerfully rooted woman who went from bartending and birth control to birth keeping and herbal medicine. Sydney has a big and beautiful story of how she has let the challenging experience in her life, like losing her mother at a young age, debilitating period pain, and long-term birth control use, change her into the woman who she is today, an extremely rooted and trusting woman. She is someone who speaks honestly, openly, and really very deeply about the things that really matter in life. So tune in for Sydney's big and beautiful story. You'll want to hear this one. Okay, welcome, Sydney.
Hi.
I'm so happy you're here. We were just talking about before we started recording how fun this is, since we've actually gotten to spend a lot of in-person time together this year, which has been really sweet.
Yeah, in-person time and a lot of like voice messaging conversations. I feel like
Yeah,
we
totally.
probably like tapped in on some of the stuff we're going to talk about, but this will be cool to like just have this space to go deep.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so the first thing I want to ask you just is what I've been asking everyone, which is, what phase of life are you in? So we have the maiden, the mother, the sorceress, and the crone.
I am in my maiden phase. I would say I'm like deep in my maiden phase. I'm 28 and really wanting to move into motherhood soon. So I'm like not quite on the cusp, but getting close to the cusp of like maiden to mother.
Yeah, you're 28, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Nancy Lucina, my teacher from Blood Mystery School, she shares about how like regardless of if you have kids or not, most women experience that maiden to mother shift around their Saturn return, which you're kind of like coming up on now, I would
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting to just, I mean, we've chatted about that so much, like how it feels to be in that in between because I mean, I'm 27, but oh gosh, I feel so in between as well, the two life phases. And yeah, I just wonder how that's been for you because I think for me, it feels really like there's a part of me that's so airy and excited and wanting to learn and bop around and be fairy like. And that's kind of familiar to me because I've been that way for many years. But there's a new part of me, and I think you can relate to this, that's like, no, let me root down, like let me find my home and my people and let me, yeah, like be here and be present right here. So yeah, I wonder how that feels for you being in this kind of liminal space between maiden and mother.
Yeah, I mean, part of me feels like I am just kind of an in-between person. And also, I feel like I've kind of, for a lot of my life, been like a dreamer and like having fun. And like right now, I'm so in my maiden of like, I love sleeping. So like I keep thinking like once I better get all the sleep I can because like once I move into motherhood, I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna have that based on what I've heard other people say and just like dreaming or traveling or waking up and doing whatever that day. But also I'm an earth sign and I'm such a like earthy person, I feel like just the
Yeah, you are.
slowness and like I love to be grounded, like and so I feel like I don't know, in a weird way, I can like see if I zoom out in my life, like I feel like I've been in this energy of maiden to mother for a long time, like playful
Mm,
and fun, but also like my heart and my body really wants to be like grounded at home, like eating meals with loved ones, being cozy.
yeah, I totally know. I feel like you're one of the most grounded people that I know, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
It's just like, yeah, I like it. It feels good. Even though like sometimes I feel chaos.
Mm,
Um, but I think that's also just like I have this big idea of like just the chaos of being a woman. So like peaceful
mm.
chaos is what I strive for and what I like feel good in.
What is that like? What does that look like? Peaceful chaos. How is that? How do you do that in your life?
Um, I think just like the world in general is pretty chaotic, even like out in nature in the forest, just like, it's not like neat and tidy and orderly. And I'm not super like neat and tidy and orderly, but like just having this sense of, I guess it's really like rootedness is what is really like singing to me. Like, or the photo in my mind is just like the roots of the tree. And it's like, no matter what's going on around me, like I'm still rooted, I'm still here, like practicing coming back to now
Mm,
is really important for me because like I said, I am like a dreamer and yeah, I guess it really is internal. But I also think that it does convey externally because I get told a lot that I'm like super chill. So I'm like, that's good to know. Like sometimes when I feel crazy on the inside, I'm like, I'm glad I'm not acting crazy on the outside.
mm. Except for in your luteal phase, right?
Oh yeah. If it's my luteal phase and if you're like Shane, then
Oh,
you can
I'm
prove me
kind of like
wrong.
half kidding, but no, I mean I definitely see that in you and it's cool because for me, like what you're describing really does sound like how I view the mother archetype within myself, within my yeah, like internal cycle, my, moving through maiden, mother, sorceress, and crone each month. I feel like when I'm in my mother phase, my mother archetype, I've named her Gaia. And all my archetypes have like a catchphrase. And Gaia's catchphrase is, I can hold it all, including myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just reminds me of what you shared that like there can be so much going on and you're just capable of holding it. And that's really beautiful. And I really, yeah, honor you for that.
Thank you. I think maybe like now the past few years getting to know my cycle more and like getting more like allowing that to like shape my life. Maybe that's why I do kind of enjoy the luteal phase so much or like being the sorceress because I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like I'm gonna be crazy and I'm gonna be like fiery and like probably a little mean and and like and I'm gonna use me being in this phase of my cycle, like not as an excuse, but like as a reason, you know?
Mm,
And it's
yeah,
like
I love
it's
that.
kind of fun. Like I just like that persona.
I do too. I go through phases where right now I'm kind of in a phase where I feel like my luteal is my most comfortable, like the most me of all of the archetypes of my cycle. And I feel like that's always a good sign that I'm like living in alignment with my truth, that I feel, good in that phase. That's actually what phase
Yeah.
I'm in right now as we're recording.
Okay. Cool.
What phase, yeah, I want to ask you that. What phase of your cycle are you in right now?
I'm in Maiden. So I'm just like
Oh.
Maiden through and through right now.
That's amazing. I feel like that's such a good phase to record in, especially for a podcast, because I always feel really chatty in my maiden phase.
Yeah, I haven't been like socializing that much recently because we're moving and like I'm just a homebody and just whatever, all my excuses. But I've been just like craving. I'm like, I need to hang out with someone. Like, I need to hang out with a woman specifically because it's like Shane and my brother here. And so I have like other friends, but I'm like, I need to call Anna or something. Like, I need to chat with a woman.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a different energy. I mean, I'm traveling all the time with just my male partner. And I often feel like, man, I really just need some time with my female friends.
Yeah.
Because it really fills your cup up in such a unique and special way.
Yeah, like I feel like women just like on some subconscious level, we just like know what the other women around us need and we're able to like give that to them. I feel like a
Mm,
lot of times when I hang out with friends or am on like a Zoom call with like the RBK people or something, like coming away from that, I'm always like, man, I didn't know I needed that, but like I really needed that.
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mhm.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit. And yeah, I mean, you just mentioned RBK. You and I did RBK together, Radical Birth Keeper School, and that's how we know each other, which is special because I think, RBK isn't necessarily related to bleeding in the sense of our monthly cycle, but it is in a similar vein, that wise woman education. And
Mhm.
I think the women who are drawn to these sorts of programs tend to be in touch with their bodies. So, yeah, I'm just curious. I really want to get started on just hearing how that journey to your body came for you. So, I think the most honest place to start really is asking you about your first bleed, your menarche, as much as you remember. Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I actually don't remember it at all.
Hmm.
What I do remember is like that it was in sixth grade. So I think I was like 12. And I was reflecting earlier, like really trying to remember. And I even texted my childhood best friend because she has like a better memory than me. So a lot of times I'm like, do you remember this? Like, so I text her, I'm like, any chance you remember my first bleed? Um, and she didn't, but she was like, I know it was before mine. So sixth grade sounds right. And but I had like her as my best friend, and then I had my older sister too. So I would imagine that they're like the two people that I went to when I did have it. Um, but yeah, I don't have like a any specific memory of that
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of similar for me. I remember bits and pieces of mine, but like I don't remember what it felt like to like look and see that I was bleeding for the first time or anything. And I feel like that can be a common story. And what it just reminds me of is like the lack of a ceremony and celebration of
Yeah.
this rite of passage that we can't even really remember when it happened. Um, yeah. So then often what I'll say is like, well, what is your first memory of bleeding?
Um, I would have to say the first memories I have of bleeding are like the pain, like having really bad cramping.
Mm,
And then I also had really like the thing I remember is like having really bad cramps and like really bad acne.
mm,
And so that was why like I maybe bled for 2 years, 2.5 years, and then got put on birth control.
mm,
Um, got put on, but I mean, yeah, that is kind of how it was because I was a child in a way, you
yeah.
know?
So like you went to the doctor with your mom, I'm presuming for these issues you were having with painful cycles and acne, and the suggestion was the birth control. Was it the pill?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom was a nurse, so I feel like there was never any discussion of like why you're having pain or maybe you could try this. It was just like, oh, take ibuprofen. And then since it was interfering with my life, then it was like, okay, let's go into the gynecologist and get you on the pill. Like I kind of feel like my mom just brought me in and was like, yeah, we're here to get her on the pill. And then they were like, all right, here you go. I don't fully remember it, but I feel like that's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. It's like I was, yeah, the birth control pill, what it really has become, which I shared on Kate's episode. And Kate, I mean, Kate is the one who brought this up, that it's really like the modern day initiation. So it's so interesting that you
Yeah.
don't necessarily remember your first bleed like this pure initiation because that wasn't marked. So instead, what happened is this warped societal initiation of getting on birth control is what replaced it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I was reflecting earlier and I was like, I feel like a lot of the beginning of my story was is just like the classic output of like today's society and what especially our generation of women who like got their periods and then got put on the pill and then were on the pill for however long and then a lot of women have like PCOS or painful stuff and that was covered up for so many years by the pill and then that like turns into fertility issues and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's a really sadly that's like a really classic story of our generation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it is. So what happens next? Does the pill help you? Like what walk me through that first couple years being on the pill?
I think the pill helped. It cleared up my acne and it I don't think I was ever like completely pain free on the pill. I would still have cramping and pain with my period, but it definitely helped so that it wasn't like as magnified as it was without it. And I really like never thought anything of it. Like I'm sure there was a part of me that kind of thought it was cool that I was like being put on the pill, but I also kind of remember thinking it was a little weird that I think I started on when I was 14 and that was before I had even had sex. So I think there was part of me that was like, it's kind of weird to be on birth control and I'm not even having sex.
Yeah.
Um, I do remember like thinking, having that thought. But yeah, I just didn't even like question it. And I feel like that really played a significant part of like just being disembodied or disassociated from my body and like really that narrative of like bleeding is no big deal. You just put a tampon in, take Advil if you have cramps and like go on with your day. The only
Yeah.
person, it's kind of funny, the only person who really like and it, I don't know, I guess in a way it was him honoring it. Was like my dad was like, I don't know if it's just because he's kind of like softy, like seeing his daughter in pain, but my dad would really, if my mom was at work, my dad would like let me stay home from school. He would like take care of me, and like I have a few memories of like my dad just like feeling bad and like caring for me while I was bleeding. And
Mm.
that's like, now that I'm thinking about it, like that's actually like really special and sweet.
Yeah, that's so sweet. That makes me smile, like thinking about your dad just caring for you. Like, what a nice, yeah, like we have negative imprints in our stories, most of us, but also most of us have really sweet imprints too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I gotta let me talk to my dad about this, not my mom who would be like, take some Advil and go to school.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I think because for a lot of the women in the older generation, like that's just what they were told. They're like, well, I just deal with it. And it's become this
Mhm.
like passed down, almost another initiation to like have pain every month when like that's really not ideal or normal.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so how long are you on birth control then? You get on it when you're
I
14, so then
yeah, I was on birth control until I was 24, and
wow,
like
10 years.
really never questioned it at all until I was 24.
Okay, so what happened between 14 and 24 that you started questioning it?
A lot happened. I was kind of thinking about this earlier, and um, in a way, I feel like my initiations in life have been through loss, like losing people or certain aspects of myself has always been like a really led to a like really great awakening for me. Um, so yeah, I mean a lot happened between 14 and 24 obviously, but when I was 23, 22, my mom passed away, and that was just like the floor falling out from beneath me, you know?
Mm,
And that just like completely changed my life.
mm,
Um yeah, obviously losing your mother is, I mean, something that most people do experience in life, but I don't think that that takes away from like the significance of it, and
mm,
especially being young and just like I was such a party girl. And so I was so like not the way I am now. I was so just like up in the air, floating around, exploring, just like having fun, being crazy, like um and honestly, yeah, that actually like maybe that was what really like brought me down to earth. Almost like a
mm,
bird. I don't know, the image that comes to my mind is like a bird flying and then just like dying and falling and smacking the concrete. So like
mm,
a rough initiation, but something now, like years later, I'm really, really grateful for because it put me on such a different path. And I can't imagine like my life going any other way. It's really led me onto like a path of gratitude for everything, even like the worst things. And I
mm,
think maybe that even led me back to like my body.
mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's such a big story to hold, and I think you're right. Like no matter the fact that eventually we will all probably lose our mothers before we ourselves pass, that is such a huge initiation because it's like our mother line is that is our red thread, you know, that thread that runs through all the women's wombs and what informs our experiences. And yeah, I mean, no matter what your relationship with your mother is, that's going to really, really impact how you're living your life and what is alive within you. And it's interesting to hear you say that that's what brought you back to earth. And it's even more interesting to hear that you were like quite an airy, floaty person because yeah, I mean, I didn't meet you that way. I met a very rooted woman, and it's worth worth saying that I think most of the women I know who have had really intimate experiences with death are some of the most rooted women I know. So, yeah, just really, really honoring that story you're carrying. And um, yeah, it feels like too, we're just honoring your mom by being here and sharing these stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, when I was setting up for this, I have her urn and I like brought her in the room and I
Oh,
set up a little like kind of altar for her. And I was wearing my great grandmother's her grandmother's necklace. And then I was kind of sitting and taking a moment before this call. And I mean, I don't know what it was, but something about it was just like I took her out of the room and I took the necklace off and like I was just like I think they're present here, but also like I really just wanted to allow this to like be my story.
mm, I love that. I love the intuition. Just knowing when something doesn't feel quite right and being like, yeah, the energy keeper of the space.
Yeah,
And of
I
course,
try.
like our words are bringing people in, and also you are owning your space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think someone told me once that there's like always she's a medium and she was like there's always like thousands of spirits behind each person. And I believe that and I really feel like my ancestors are always with me, but I think like sometimes there's moments when it's like we really step forward and it's like okay, this is me like and my ancestors are back supporting me, but like this is me here.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, you have done a lot of I don't want to say work because that doesn't feel like quite the right word. A lot of intentional ancestral healing, I feel. At least we've had a lot of conversations about that. And I know you hosted one of your online circles with the topic of, yeah, ancestry. And I just think it's beautiful to know that that is something that you connect with. And also that you're here on this podcast sharing your story. And what we're going to get into is your healing from being on birth control. And to me, that is the perfect example of someone who's doing the work in their lineage to heal. I think all of us who are here connecting with our bodies and sharing our stories, like it's not just for us. That's something that has been such a big realization for me lately is like, wow, this is not all just for me. This is some of this is other people's stuff that I'm healing, and some of this is stuff that I'm healing so that past generations and future generations don't have to do it or can be healed. And yeah, I think it's easy to forget how big the work we're doing is, but that just by being here sharing our stories, it is really big work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think work is the right word actually. I just think that our culture like thinks work is only if you get money.
Yeah.
But that just reminded me of like a story that I used to carry that was really heavy and have like very intentionally set down probably the past uh like year or two. Um there's just a lot of what's the word? Like shit that runs through my like the the woman lineage in my family and a lot of just like chaos and unwellness. Um, and for a long time with like the pain I was having in my with my period, like I made up this story that like I don't have like some of the mental health stuff that a lot of other women in my family have had. And so I kind of created this story that's like the pain that I feel is because like all the shit and drama and like bad stuff that has happened to the women in my lineage like lives in my womb. And I was like, that has to be what it is. Like I'm carrying it in my body because I can. And I think like in a way that like that story helped me for a little bit. I think it helped me like make meaning of the pain in a more like energetic, spiritual way, not really coming into like the physical realm. Um, but yeah, I think actually working with Kristen and having those sessions with her, I think that I brought that up with her, and I just realized through all the things in the past 2 years that like one, that was a story that I completely made up, and two, I don't have to like keep that story because just like such a heavy, like honestly, like burden to carry. And yeah,
Yeah.
just I don't know what it was you said just a few minutes ago, but it took me back to that story. And it's like I'm glad that I set that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's that's such an important point to bring up because I think what I said was sometimes we're doing this healing work and it's not just for us. And you're so right that like it isn't our responsibility to hold anyone else's stuff because actually what I've learned from for a while I was practicing in a modality, well, practicing as in I was receiving and participating in this modality of family constellations. And in family constellations therapy, the idea is we need to come back into right relationship with all of our relations, meaning not sever the connection, but also meaning we can't take on and hold a trauma that's not our own because not only does that harm us, it also does a disservice for the person whose trauma that is because it's part of their dharma to or karma, whichever whichever makes the most sense, to move through that. Like that's part of their legacy, part of their story to do that healing work for themselves. And so we're doing both parties a disservice by yeah, taking that away, taking that on. And I do think, there's so many things about how our womb stores imprints, and that definitely can be true. And we can also choose to let go of that at any moment. So, yeah, I love that you came to that realization that you could put that down.
Yeah, it feels like that was a big choice point, like for our lineage of like you just said, like that could be true, and I don't have to like be victimized by it. I don't have to be like, I hold all of this in my body, like I'm such a hero victim, and
Right?
I just
Because
have to
then it's like,
suffer.
yeah, then it's almost as if you're keeping it going. Like you said, it's to me, often the lineage healing stuff doesn't come and like, I mean, not that it's not deep work, but a lot of it is for me just making different choices moment to moment. And it's like a lot of just changing your patterns. And so it sounds like what part of that was for you is just like, let me put down this big thing I'm carrying. And wow, like that's actually the lineage healing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love like it sounds so silly, but like I just love knowing that I have a choice, like in
Mhm.
everything. I think about this so much, but just like in moments where I'm like, feel like I am struggling or I am suffering or I've created some big story and like maybe there is a lot of truth in it, just knowing that's like, and it's not always, sometimes I'm just like, I'm just gonna suffer and be dramatic and miserable. But when I do get those moments where I'm like, oh, or I could choose something totally different, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hallelujah. Right. We have a
It's like
choice.
it's just like feels like freedom. Like, oh yeah, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. No, it's
And I'm
amazing.
always remembering that and forgetting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've been on quite the transformation since your mother's death. And that was, you were 22 when she died?
Yeah, I was 22.
Okay. So,
So,
yeah,
oh,
walk me through that. Like what happens after that? Like what's your cocoon phase like? What is the butterfly like? What happens?
so my cocoon phase was like Honestly, it was like I died myself. I didn't get out of bed for like 6 months. I just slept and watched TV. Um, and then eventually I got out of bed and went to Thailand for 3 months. And
Wow.
that was, yeah. I also like just to weave Shane in here. Shane and I met like 6 months before my mom
Mm,
died. So he definitely like nurtured me through that.
wow.
And yeah, that's definitely like a weird kind of start to a relationship, but we're both weird and went like pretty deep fast anyway. So Um, but yeah, so after that happened, Shane and I went to Thailand for 3 months the next year.
Mm,
Um, and traveling has always that's another actual like big initiation for me, I think.
mm,
Or I don't know if it's an initiation, but it's always been an opportunity for me to like expand my perspective.
yeah.
um, and just like what is possible like for my life and everyone's life in the world. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, that was really great spending 3 months in Thailand doing like volunteering, doing outdoor work. So working out my grief
Mm.
in the heat, in the sun, like digging holes and fixing roads and building stuff. Thinking about it now, I'm like, wow, that was such a contrast to just like being in bed.
Yeah, but I think it's really beautiful that you allowed yourself to fully collapse, you know. I think yeah, there's a lot of pressure in our culture to keep moving and not necessarily get over it because I do feel like we do have a culture that's somewhat sensitive to death, especially one that's as close as your mother. But I think there is this idea that like getting to it, getting back to it is what's going to heal you. Like, oh, you'll feel better if you just get back to whatever. And I don't know, for me, that's not the case. I think that feeling something through and facing it is, yeah, like the only way to come out the other end. And or the other end, like, what does that even mean? Because this stuff is grief and healing is forever, but to come back into your life from an intact place. So yeah, I commend you in that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I didn't have a choice. And also, I hear what you're saying, and I think it is like we do have to allow these things to change us. Because if we try to just pretend like it didn't happen or it didn't completely change us, or like it's okay, we'll just keep going, it's like that's not honoring
Mm-hmm.
ourselves or anyone besides
Mm-hmm.
like capitalism. I don't know. But yeah, I was bartending at Bonefish, which is just like a chain restaurant, and I fucking hated it. And I hated it for a while, but I was just like, I was also going to school and I hated it. And so that was like my doorway into like, I was like, I'm never going back to that job again. I'm
Mm.
quitting school. I ended up going back to school, but whatever. um,
I love
but
that phrase. We have to allow it to change us. Yeah, that's really impactful.
yeah, I think that's a big metaphor for just life in general too.
Mm,
And like, what's the point if we don't?
yeah, I remember the song I just learned at my Shark Rising festival this summer, and I only remember the first line. I need to look at my recordings to hear the rest of the lyrics, but it's funny. I've been singing it today, the first line I've been singing. And it's the first line is I'm gonna let life move me. And yeah, that just reminds me of what you're saying. It's like we're on this ride, we might as well flow with it
hmm
and not resist.
Yeah. It's so much harder when you resist. I mean, it's hard anyway when you don't resist, but
Yeah, and I think as women too, like we have luckily this added ability to flow because we're constantly in flow. And we have the opportunity to meet a death of sorts at our menstrual phase every month.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm curious through all of this transformation that you're having, through your 6 month cocoon and then your 3 month in Thailand, and we'll get past that, I'm sure. But like, what's your relationship to your body? Are you still on birth control?
Um, yeah, I was still on birth control. I think maybe even like going to Thailand and like doing the outdoor work and working with my body was like a little like whisper or like tiptoe back into my body. Um, and another thing I got really into yoga during that time. Like once I came out of my cocoon. And I had like dabbled with yoga a little bit before in college when like actually when my nana died, my dad's mother, and I was just going through some other loss stuff during that. Like yoga was really a sweet way for me to like feel held, or it like gave me a sense of home.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't see that as like home being my body, but like sitting here now
Mm.
thinking about it, I think that's what it was and what it is.
That could make me cry. Home is our bodies. Yes. Yes, that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did a yoga training in 2020.
Mm.
Um, and my it was totally my yoga teacher, Rachel, is the reason I got off of birth control. And I don't even think she like really had to say that much. I remember like one class her saying something about if you don't love your period, we need to talk.
I love that.
And I never talked to her about it, but
No, you didn't
still
talk
like
to
that,
her?
no, but that really sticks with me. And I can't remember like other things she said, but I remember that it was like that day that finally like switched on a light in me. And I was like, I'm gonna get off birth control.
Wow.
Yeah,
So did you?
I did. Um, I don't think during the training, I think a couple months after.
Yeah.
And I didn't make like a whole big thing out of it. I wasn't like, I didn't go to my doctor and ask for permission. I was just like,
Yeah.
I'm just not picking it up anymore. I'm not telling anyone about it. I'm just not going to do it. I feel like I was a little bit underprepared for the changes that were going to happen. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say like during this time, so after she said that, was it more just like an intuitive, like, yeah, this isn't right for my body, or did you do research? What was that like?
I don't really remember. I'm thinking I have the book Beyond the Pill. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
By like Jolene Brighton,
Dr.
I think is
Julie
her name.
Brighton. Yeah.
And I follow her on Instagram, and I'm sure that maybe I started following her. I got that book before I got off.
Hmm.
It might have been after, but I didn't really do research. I think it was just like that was really the entry point for me, like slowly becoming like more sovereign and being like, oh, I can take care of myself. I can make my own decisions.
Hmm.
Um, I can like choose what to do with my body. I can like have my own thoughts about it actually, and not
Hmm.
just do whatever people
Yeah.
tell me to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like Rachel, like, I don't think she knows, but she really like just gave me permission by, and I think she really piqued my curiosity by being like, if you don't love your period, like, let's talk.
Did she just say that randomly?
I think, I don't know. I think she was talking about We talked about a lot of stuff in yoga training.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't just yoga, and we had all women in our group. So
Mhm.
that was really my first time like sitting in circle with women. And
Oh,
we
so
met
special.
every other weekend, like all day Saturday and all day Sunday for
Yeah.
3 months. And so yeah, I love reflecting back on that. And like, dang, that really was like my first time like being with women
Yeah.
in a like held container like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a huge catalyst for um all sorts of womb healing. I mean, I've shared about this online and we'll probably share in this podcast my own blood mystery story one day, but the turning point for me in healing my unique flavor of what was going on with not wellness in my womb um, was going to a women's circle for the first time. Like, I firmly believe that that was the most impactful part of my journey because there's something about being in a group of women, especially around women who are connected to their bodies and who are initiated in that way, that changes you. It changes your brain. And I think probably for you, it was like, I mean, I could be totally making this up, but from what I know about birth controls, it really alters your brain. So I'm imagining it was something like, oh, like this isn't me. There's something foreign that's preventing me from being me. Did you feel something like that?
Yeah, I think I had this sense of like I got put on birth control pretty soon after I ever started my cycle. And then I was on it for 10 years. So I had this sense of like, I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
Like, because I've been muted and like literally the connection of my brain to my womb has been cut off my entire like cycling life,
Yeah.
which is like so crazy to
Yeah.
think
And for anyone
about.
listening, it's like that is literal. Like Sydney's not just being metaphorical here. Like birth control cuts off that communication between your brain and your ovaries, which, if we want to think about it on a more metaphysical level, that's like your mind and your intuition. So cutting off that connection, which I mean, that's a big portion of your body, your brain to your ovaries. Yeah.
Huge,
So what's
huge.
that? So who do you become after you get off birth control? What's that? I want to hear about your transition. What was that like?
Um, so I would say I'm laughing, but I don't know if it's actually funny. My like weird initiations through pain was like the first bleed I had getting off of birth control. Um, I was staying at my brother's house actually up here in North Carolina, and I got so freaking sick. Like I thought I had like the stomach flu or something, like
Oh,
horrible cramps, throwing up, like feel like I'm gonna pass out, diarrhea, just like, and I was with my little brother staying, and he was like living with two other guys, like roommates,
oh
and I
no.
was like in their basement visiting and just like dying. And I had no idea what was going on. And I was just like, holy shit, I remember having cramps and pain when I was younger before I got on birth control, but I was like, but I don't ever remember this. Um, so that was like, I was like, oh, maybe it's just the first one. Like, it's probably a big change. And then I think that kind of kept happening. Um, and so, yeah, that was definitely an initiation because then that put me more on the path of learning about being a woman and like what's normal, what's not normal, what's healthy, what's not healthy, like learning a little bit, learning the signs of my bodies and things I could do to try to heal that. But I definitely I have been very patient with everything since I got off birth control because I was on it for so long. So I just kept being like, I mean, 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing people be like, so many people were like, oh, after 3 months it'll regulate, or after about a year it'll like you'll get just be good or like just do this. I kind of still get so annoyed by people being like, have you tried eating mango? Like that's what helps me.
Mango.
I don't know. I think I just made that up. Maybe papaya or something.
I don't know. That's so funny. Okay, so yeah, like I mean, I know this about your story because we're friends that there's been, yeah, just like a lot of really intense, painful bleeds. So you said, you started learning about things and trying things. What are some of the things you learned in that process of reattuning to your body?
Mm. This is like so interesting to just go back and remember and reflect on and like see the little seeds of like sovereignty or returning to my body. But then also there was so much still like outward seeking because I think I went back to the doctor first and I was like my gynecologist who I went to since I was 14 and she was just like, "Oh, just go back on the pill."
Uh,
And I was
yeah.
like, "I don't want to do that." And that was just like the only option. She's like, "We can do some testing and stuff, but go
Yeah,
back on
they
the
have nothing
pill."
else to offer you.
Yeah, and it was like she didn't care at all. She wasn't like it was never like, "Oh, wow, like that sounds rough." It was just like, "Girl, just get back on the pill."
It's
And I'm
so weird.
like, girl, no. Yeah. And I definitely had times like at first I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then the longer it continued, I was like, am I gonna have to go back on the pill? But then I've just been like, no, I'm not doing that. Like that's not
Yeah.
the solution at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tried going to my gynecologist and I also had this weird, she was like testing me for PCOS and what is it called? Like the nurse assistant or whoever you normally see that's like not the doctor.
Yeah. The
Um,
PA.
yeah, this woman called me after we did the testing, which I think it was like a blood test and a ultrasound.
Hmm.
And then she was like, "Yeah, so I think you do have PCOS." I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And she's like, "It looks like you might." Like she was just like, "You
Oh,
might," or "I think," or like maybe. And I was just like so annoyed.
yeah.
And then somewhere throughout that process I did like a prenatal yoga training and that teacher told me about a doctor that she goes to that she really likes. And I think that was more of like a I don't know if she was a naturopath or what, but it was just more of like a holistic
Mhm.
doctor's office.
Yeah.
And so then I went there and she did some blood tests for me. And then she just put me on a bunch of uh, supplements. Somewhere in between all of this, I was like vegan and then
Mm.
vegetarian, and then coming back to just eating. And then oh, no, no, this is my gynecologist. It was like, go on the pill. Or she was like, or you could try going vegan because she was vegan.
She suggested that you go vegan.
Yeah, like
Huh?
she doesn't, it's so clear to me now that she doesn't know anything about like women's physiology and
I
what's
mean,
supportive.
the micronutrients that you need for like optimal progesterone and like all the things to prevent cramps, they're found in animal-based foods.
That was just kind of like her being like, I don't know, maybe try going vegan again. Like,
I mean, I get where people are coming from when they say those things because I know for me and a lot of other women, and I've talked about this on the podcast already, that going vegan, if you have a really terrible processed foods diet, it can help you a little bit, but it's only helping you because like you're eating more real foods. But I guess now there's so many fake vegan foods that it probably doesn't really help that much at all.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I saw the other woman And I liked her at first, but then like every time I would go to see her, she was just like telling me to take more supplements. And so I would be like spending hundreds of dollars on supplements every time I left there. And I'm like, is this weird?
That's also like the classic route, like going from the medical system to a naturopath who puts you on hundreds of dollars of supplements. And it's, to me, that's like the idea of like greenwashing. You're just like pharmaceuticals with a different look.
Yeah, and it was like buying them there, and it kind of just felt like she was like a salesperson.
Yeah, I do think there's a
Um,
place for supplements, but like being on so many, it's kind of like that's probably not ideal.
yeah. And just like I don't know, it was really a lack of I like to understand stuff.
Hmm.
And so if someone is like telling me, take this or do this, I'm like, okay, why? Like it helps me to like make lifestyle changes if I know why I'm doing
Hmm.
something and like what it's how it's helping.
Hmm.
Um, so to just be like every time I went, like, oh, take keep taking the ones that you're taking and then like add these in and like I'm also not one to like taking a bunch of stuff every single day.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really seeing any changes. Um, and so then I was just kind of like, oh, then I saw another person. I saw my dad's doctor, who my dad and his wife go to. They're like, try going to her. I really like her. Oh my God, I'm just like remembering all of this. This woman, she's a woman. She told me, some women just have bad luck. You might just have bad luck.
Oh my God. This is this is a trained medical professional.
A trained medical professional. I was like a young 23, 24-year-old woman, like
Bad luck. I can't.
coming to my third doctor. And I think that was when I was just like, I'm not going to get my answers from these doctors.
Yeah.
They're not giving me anything. Like
Yeah.
that was like during mask days, so I was wearing a mask when she told me that, but like I was like
Underneath
I
that mask, you were scowling.
so wish I could go back in time and like take my mask off and just like burn her with my gaze.
Well, it's honestly, I mean, it's funny in a certain way that that's what she said, but it's also just further proof that the medical system really has nothing to offer a woman like you who, yeah, like the healing is much more nuanced than what they have to offer because what they have to offer is bad luck or covered up with birth control. And those are not viable options for someone who's looking for deep healing.
Hmm.
So what happens next?
What happens next? I did a doula training and I did it with this woman, Hayes. She's from California and she's like a long time um older. I mean, she's in her 50s, but that's kind of older for a girl in her 20s and like looking for mentorship. Um, Also, just pause to say like a common theme throughout this all was like almost seeking a mother figure
Mm,
because I had lost mine. And
yeah.
I kind of wonder in a way like because my mom was a nurse and she wasn't really like connected to her body, I would say, or her cycle in this way that I probably still would have been seeking in this way,
Mm,
for someone else that was more, more like wise woman energy.
yeah.
Um, but Hayes was really sweet. And she was into like herbal medicine and just like very natural living, older Black woman, beautiful woman. And so being in that training, I learned so much about my body and a woman's body and physiology and
Mm,
like there was so much I was learning where I didn't even know I was learning. But I remember just being like, how am I learning this? I'm 24, or maybe I was
Yeah.
25 at this point. I don't know. But it's like I'm just now learning this. This is absurd. So I would say like my yoga teacher journey kind of transformed into like starting to study about birth work,
Mm,
and
same.
just obviously that, yeah, is like innately comes in with like learning more about my own body and women's bodies in general and how to care for
Mhm.
them and what we need and what we don't need. And so that was when I started to find more answers, I would say, when I did that
Yeah,
training.
that's amazing. I love I think that's also such, yeah, a common theme in our culture is finding out this information about our bodies and being like, what have I been doing all these years without this? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. So what made you like want to do a doula training?
So after I did my regular yoga training, then I wanted to do prenatal yoga training. I got a scholarship for a program.
Mm,
And I've always been like a big baby person. Like I've always loved babies when I was little. Yeah, I just love like holding babies and being around babies and
yeah,
babysitting. So that was kind of like learning about women and then pregnancy, and like there's just something about women and pregnancy and like birthing babies, and like it just all blows my mind. And even now after so many years of studying it, I'm just like I just can't believe that two people have sex and then a baby grows inside a woman's uterus and then she births it out of her vagina and then it becomes a human. That's
I
just
know.
so wild to me.
Well, the whole experience of being a woman is like that to me. It's like we just have this cycle where like we have this cervical fluid that shows that we could have a baby. And then 2 weeks later, we have this like gorgeous red fluid that comes out of us as another symbol of our fertility and like death and rebirth and death and rebirth. And to have a cult like an overculture that wants to cover that up and say like some women just have bad luck, that is so insane to me. Like there
Yeah.
just is so much sacredness in it. Um, yeah, yeah. So that leads me into just asking like, where are you now? Like you went through these years of birth control, of being disconnected. You had the gigantic initiation of your mother's death, followed by another gigantic initiation of coming off birth control. You change your life, and now what?
Now I'm just like a completely different person. Getting off of birth control, I realized like how I had such more of a range of like emotions.
Mm,
Um, and then being with women a lot really transformed me in so many different ways, in the ways that it does. Um, where am I now? Now I live in North Carolina, up in the mountains, surrounded by trees, out of the city, out of the chaos of people running around the city, smogging it up. So just like have really found peace in that way, and also just living, I can't even like it's not even a like 180. It feels more than that. Just living a totally different life, a totally different pace of life, going from being like the party girl bartender who hates her job, and to now just being a bartender would be totally out of the question for me because I live cyclically now and like live at the pace of my cycle.
mm,
Um, and that doesn't like really make sense being plugged into like the real world. But I guess I've really unplugged from that and really like unsubscribed from this like bigger cultural narrative of like go, 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 life being
Mm,
about going to work and making money and being super productive. I got really obsessed with like slowing down
mm,
throughout those years and maybe to a point where I got like too slow for a little bit and now I'm kind of balancing back out. But it has just been like so nourishing for me to like find my own pace and my own rhythm and like allow myself to move with that. And also kind of like I feel like I had to fight for that a little bit. And I feel
mm,
like I actually feel like my womb had to fight for that in a
mm,
way. And like, maybe that's part of it all was like her just screaming at me. Like she hadn't been in communication with me for most of my like adult woman life.
mm.
And so once I stopped taking the pill, she just had a lot to say and was like very demanding that I hear what she has to say.
No, I
um,
think yeah, I think that's so common is, and not even just common, that's like the design that our wombs will scream at us until we listen. And then when we listen, she will scream louder because we're listening. That was my experience too. So what have you learned from your womb?
oh my God. That's like, I don't even know how to put it into words. I guess I've learned like what life is really about.
Mm,
And it's not about all that other stuff that is going on out there. It's really about, I don't know, what is it about? Being with ourselves, being with our loved ones, being in nature, being in in tune with that pace. I don't know, the words like pace and cycle and rhythm are like
mm,
really here with me now.
mm.
And moving at the pace of nature and slowing down and taking care of ourselves. I've learned and I'm still learning like taking compared to just like what the mainstream culture puts out about like self-care, like true self-care is compared to that is a lot. And I find myself sometimes like getting frustrated being like, am I high maintenance? Like, do I need to do all of this to take care of myself? Like being annoyed with it. I'm still learning to be like, this is loving and this is me caring
Mm.
for myself and I'm worth it and I deserve it. And um yeah, I feel like there's been so many lessons. I mean, you know how it is. There's always new lessons arising.
Yeah, and it's interesting the part about am I high maintenance? Like that, and the central question that I'm hearing there is like, do I deserve this? Am I worthy of this? And that just makes so much sense because our sense of worthiness lives in our wombs. And so, I mean, I just had this realization a couple of days ago in the thick of doing this first round of interviews for the podcast, where after one of my interviews, my ovaries just started hurting. And I'm sitting there like, what's going on? And the message just came through very clearly to me like, oh, wow, what I'm realizing doing these interviews is I have not kept up with my womb self care.
Mm.
Um, and that looks like, last night I was like, all right, yoni steam stat. Like, I need this yoni steam now. And, texting my sister, can I borrow your castor oil pack? And, the things. But it also looks like, am I listening? You know, like, am I creating the spaciousness in my day to listen? Um, yeah. And I just feel like that's such a beautiful thread that is woven through your entire story is listening and and coming home to your body. So, yeah, what's your period like now? Do you feel at home in your body?
I definitely feel at home in my body. I'm not like perfectly healed. I'm not having pain-free periods. Um, I'm not having as violent of like episodes as I did that first one. And even though I know it's not a sign of like total health or like a normal cycle, I've really learned a lot through experiencing that pain and have learned how to navigate what my body needs in those moments and like what it's trying to tell me. My brain hasn't really been able to like, it's not like, oh, I can type into Google, like, why is this happening to me? And then I get the answer. It's more of like, yeah, it's not a brain. It's not something for my brain to figure out. It really puts me not to like romanticize like painful periods, but it really puts me in my body. And it's like
Mm,
there's nowhere else I could go. There's no like disassociating because I'm just here and this is what's happening. And so like to feel so much sensation after so many years of like not having any sensation or any communication,
mm,
I've actually found a lot of beauty in it. And I'm
mm,
still like, hearing the message of like, okay, you're still not completely getting what you need. And still like working on that and trying to give myself the love and care and attention and nourishment that I need. Um, but also, yeah, I do really see the beauty and like I don't have to be perfect and it's okay and it's still like yeah, I don't know. I've really developed this like sacred relationship with myself and my body and it's also like given me a way to talk to the men in my life about my cycle and my period and like the things I need because that's just what my body needs.
mm,
So talking with Shane or my brother and like my dad, and I think that's kind of a little bit of a cool part about it is that like educating men and
yeah.
bringing them in and also allowing others to care for me
Mm,
and also being like direct about the ways that I need care
hmm.
specific.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the way in which you are extracting the beauty and the gifts from all of your experiences. It feels like, I don't know, the phrase that comes to my mind is you're just like milking life. I don't know where that came from, but that's the image I got in my mind. Like she's just milking it in a good way, not in a bad way. Like, yeah, just really extracting the goodness from what life is giving you. And that doesn't mean, like, oh, I need to be in pain forever because it's giving me a gift. Not at all. It's like, this is what's happening right now. I'm in right relationship with presence, which wasn't the case on birth control. Like you're in presence in your body and being with what's alive and turning in to face it rather than turning away. And also what you're saying about the men in your life, it's like, what a gift to model that and to, yeah, like be an example of what a woman in her fullness actually looks like. So,
Yeah,
yeah, really proud of you.
thank you.
I have one last question, which is there one piece or one thread of womb wisdom that you'd like to leave the women listening?
I guess I don't have a short answer.
It doesn't need to be short. This
But
is a long form podcast.
okay, good. Um, like to weave everything back together, I would say losing my mom and my mom died by suicide. And so that just like was glaringly showing me as if my eyes were like super glowed open, how much more we need to care for mothers and women and support them, and how much the way that we're living now is so like out of whack with what life is and what life needs in order to survive and thrive. We've gotten like so far away from that like women, and I know men too, are taking their own lives. Um, but I just find it like when you said that I'm milking life, it's like I am, because that's like my survival mechanism in a way. Like if we're not milking life, if we're not letting life change us, if we're not letting life move us and mold us and take us, what what's it all for? You know, like life can't be about going to work and making money and never seeing your family and never taking care of yourself, and like that's just depletion, depletion, depletion. We really have to slow down and like be honest with like the state of the world, internal and external, and like what our needs are and even what our desires are, like going past our needs. um yeah, so just I think that a lot of what's wrong with the world stems from the lack of honor and support that women and mothers and babies and children receive. And I just think that it's really important to take the time and like move through our fears to come back to ourselves and our bodies and what's true for us now, because it's kind of like life or death. And it's either in like the big way of life and death, like physical, or in like these little lives and deaths. Yeah. I don't know. I guess my like live your life and like be honest with yourself and the world around you, and know that you're worthy of like making changes and that you can live another life and anything is possible.
Mm. Thank you, Sydney. Wow. Just so well said. And I found myself just tearing up a little bit at your share on, yeah, how warped things have gotten. And it just reminds me of the need to make changes to center mothers and women, but specifically mothers. And yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing that, and for sharing this, just this energy of this, that phrase that I made up, I guess, milking life. I'm sure someone else has said that. But yeah, just such a sweet reminder that we are worthy of living life to the fullest. And yeah, I think it starts with reclaiming our relationships to our bodies and our relationships to our wombs. And yeah, it's been really sweet having you on here to share your womb stories. And before I ask you to share about your offerings and how women can find you, I want to just share that song because I remembered the rest of it. And it just, when you were speaking, it just kind of came back to me. So I learned this at Matriarch Rising this year, and I learned it from a woman named Brandy. Brandy I'm forgetting her last name, but she has a company called Bavana Cacao, and she led a cacao ceremony and taught this song. And the song goes, I'm gonna let life move me. I'm gonna let life take me deep. I'm gonna let life wake me from this ancient sleep. I'm gonna laugh all my laughter. I'm gonna cry all my tears. I'm gonna love the rain just as much as the sun when it clears. Yeah. So I just love that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I love that
Sydney.
song.
Well, to wrap up, I would love for you to share, a little bit about what you're offering in the world and how women can find you.
Okay. So what I'm offering is herbal medicine. My business is called Sacred Reclamation, and it's really that's like my birth stuff too. And my herbal medicine, it's all really wrapped up into like reclaiming the sacredness of life, um, and our connection with plants and reclaiming our connection with plants and people. And I loved that that was like that's in your intro to your podcast of reclaiming the sacredness of, I think it's women, because that's like what my life is about, is just living a sacred life and seeing life in that way. But I do online virtual women's circles monthly and hoping to start one up here. I live in North Carolina now. Got here like 6 months ago. So I would love to do an in-person circle here. And then I do one-on-one coaching. If anyone ever wants to book a coaching session, I have all the information on my website, sacred-reclamation.com. And then I'm on Instagram at sid.sands. And that would be, yeah, the best way to find me and get some medicine.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. I love all of your beautiful offerings in the world. And just thank you for being here today. And I love you.
I love you. Thanks for having me. This was so sweet.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.